Chapter 961. It had shrunk by 9/10. When the silver arrived, the two commanders were worried sick. The soldiers all knew that the emperor had given them 100,000 taels of silver as a reward. But with this amount of silver, how much would each person get after dividing it among the 200,000 soldiers? It was better not to divide this amount of money. But if they did not divide it, it would affect the morale of the soldiers. What should they do? When they heard that the silver had already arrived, many generals and soldiers who had made outstanding contributions revealed looks of eagerness. Helpless, the two commanders could only take out 10,000 taels of silver to reward those who had made outstanding contributions. However, many more people did not receive a single tael of silver. This caused many generals and soldiers to begin to complain, and the morale of the army began to fluctuate because of this. It was also at this time that Yeshan's counterattack arrived. First, outside disorderly Well City in the Hetao region, 200,000 cavalry suddenly appeared. The momentum was so great that when the news reached the ears of Yang Hong, he had a face of disbelief. How can this be? Yeshan only has so many soldiers. How can there be so many enemies appearing all of a sudden? This is definitely not possible. The roar was still ringing out in the tent when the scout general who had made the report was already half kneeling on the ground. Commander, it's not only the Walla cavalry that's coming, but also the cavalry of the Ili tribe, present-day Turpan. We've already merged with them. Right now, their vanguard is about to make contact with our vanguard. Commander, please make a decision quickly. When he heard that Ili division had also sent out their troops, Yang Hong fell back into his chair with a putong sound. The situation was completely out of his expectations. Originally, he had many soldiers and generals. But now, everything had turned around. He had become the one at a disadvantage. In addition, when they were dividing the silver, many of the soldiers were still dissatisfied. With such morale, how could they fight against the enemy? Retreat to Helan Mountain and wait for reinforcements at Ningxia garrison. Yang Hong knew that time did not wait for anyone. He quickly gave the order. Retreating without meeting the enemy was because they did not have a proper plan. This caused the formation of the 200,000 Ming army to be messed up. Using this opportunity, the Walla and Ili division launched a frenzied attack. The Walla army that was surrounded in disorderly Well City also took the opportunity to kill their way out. Under the pincer attack, the Baiming army was defeated. More than 10,000 men died, 40,000 were captured, and many escaped. Even the 100 red coat cannons were lost. Only 10,000 men from the firearm unit retreated. When Yang Hong brought his army back to Ningxia garrison, the 200,000 men, only. This tragic situation made Yang Hong feel like vomiting blood. But the situation made him bite the bullet and ask for reinforcements from Baiming. Yang Hong in Hetao land was defeated. Yeshan was busy cleaning up the battlefield. While catching the deserters and settling the prisoners, he also ordered General Kun Sa to lead 30,000 men towards Lang Mountain. He wanted to go through Lang Mountain and Yin Mountain to break the siege of Shajing City. But his real purpose was to attack the Baiming Xian Fu army there. After surrounding Shajing City for nearly 2 months, Shi Wanshan, who saw that the enemy had run out of food and was about to take down the city, suddenly received an urgent report from a scout. They had encountered too many defeated soldiers in front. They all said that Yang Hong was defeated. Now, Ili division's cavalry was heading towards the Shajing city. Arriving in front of the map, Shi Wanshan quickly determined that they would become the next target of Walla and Ili division's allied forces. Their military strength was not far below the enemy. Shi Wanshan had no choice but to give up on Shajing city that was about to be in his hands. He even gave up on Jingzhou city that he had just taken down and retreated to Sanbuchuan behind him. Shi Wanshan was very clear that Jingzhou city was a lone city. Once the army retreated there, if the reinforcements did not arrive in time, just the 200,000 men army's food and drink would be enough to crush the city. Therefore, when making this decision, even though they knew that they would be punished for abandoning the city, no matter if it was Deputy Commander Ancient River, Ning Wenfeng, or Eunuch Deng Chang, none of them had any doubts. More and more Datong Prefecture soldiers retreated from the battlefield and took the route of Jingzhou City. The appearance of these 50,000 people caused Shi Wanshan's army's morale to be even more lax. Some of the soldiers who did not know the truth actually followed these deserters, causing chaos to appear in the Xian Prefecture soldiers who were affected. Under the urgent military situation, Shi Wanshan did not have time to make any more arrangements. He could only watch as chaos appeared in the army and retreated to Sanbuchuan City behind him. The enemy chased too hastily. Sanbuchuan City was not big. Even if the 4 gates were wide open, they would not be able to let in 200,000 men army in a short period of time. Many soldiers saw Kun Sa and his 30,000 steel cavalry chasing behind them. They had no choice but to give up on entering the city and head northeast. Their target was very clear. It was the largest city in the grassland, Shicheng. Many of them had heard of it before. It was a paradise for the Han people. As long as they went there, they could earn a lot of money and protect their own safety. 50,000 Datong deserters and 10,000 Xian Manor deserters who were affected, a total of 60,000 people were madly marching toward the first city. With such a huge commotion, the scouting troop naturally reported the news to Yang Chendong at the first possible moment and reported it to him. 60,000 young and able-bodied men. This is good stuff. Take them all. It would be a waste not to take advantage of a free opportunity. Yang Chendong would never give up such an opportunity. He ordered the logistics division to open a shelter between Mount Saihan and Tulu City. At the same time, he ordered the new army to go there and take charge of the security work. In addition to preventing these 60,000 deserters from causing trouble, there was another more important purpose. It was to prevent the cavalry from charging in. General Kun Sa chased all the way here. Other than picking up some weapons and supplies left behind by the Baiming soldiers on the way, he only captured 1,000 deserters. This made him very unhappy. When the army arrived at Sambulakwin, they saw that it was already heavily guarded. After seeing that the city tower was full of Baiming soldiers, Kun Sa, who did not bring any siege weapons, gave up on taking over the city. Instead, he continued to head north. He had his eyes on the 60,000 deserters. If he could intercept all of them and use them for his own purposes, it would be a great victory. Both sides had the same goal. The 5-star army and the Baiming forces met on the grassland at the same time. Hundreds of shelters had been built. The Baiming soldiers who escaped here could finally put down their worries. One by one, they lined up and entered to register in an orderly manner. They were ready to enter Shicheng and join the logistics division. Around them were more than 20,000 cavalry soldiers. It was the new army led by Tiger's man. Looking south from here, they could vaguely see the grassland cavalry army coming from afar. Kun Sa rode on his horse. Beside him were valiant warriors. Just as they were moving forward, the vanguard general and Keegan appeared in front of him on their horses. "General, there is a large number of 5-star army soldiers with the 5-star flag in front." 5-star army? The army of the Heavenly Khan? Another deputy general, Wuli Ji, said. "General, before we came, General Yeshen repeatedly told us not to be enemies with the 5-star army." "Look. What are you looking at?" Kun Sa's face was full of disdain. As the generals of the Ili army, their territory was not connected to the 5-star army. What they knew and understood were only some rumors. Although this loyal duke of the Ming dynasty had many titles, such as the Heavenly Khan, the God of War, the Messenger of the Tingri Heaven, and so on, Kun Sa did not care about any of these. He only worshipped powerful strength. "How many people do they have?" "A lot. Maybe not as many as we do, but it's not much different," Keegan reported. If they don't have as many as we do, what is there to be afraid of? We chased these 60,000 Ming Dynasty soldiers all the way here. We are about to get them, and now you want us to leave? How can there be such a thing in the world? How about this, He Keegan, you go and talk to them. We won't make things difficult for them. Don't the Han people have a saying that when we meet, we will share half? Since that's the case, let them give us 30,000 prisoners and we will withdraw. Negotiate? But what if they don't agree? He Keegan did not think that the other party would listen to him at this time. After all, no one would easily agree to take out the fat meat in their mouth. Don't agree? Then not only do we want these 60,000 people, we also want these 5-star army soldiers as captives. We also want to take them to the sure city behind him. I heard that it is the largest city in the grassland. Hee, I really want to see it, Kun Sa said heroically. In the past, the Tatar tribe was suppressed by the great Khan of Tuachuobuhua, so it was difficult for the Ili army to get their hands on this place. However, it was different now. Tuachuobuhua was dead, and the Tatar forces had fallen apart. They also had a relationship with Yeshen. Now, there was no one who could suppress them. What was there to be afraid of? Furthermore, people had always said that the Han people were a bunch of herbivores. They valued Confucianism, which was the principle of being a person. It was said that the high officials in the imperial court were all led by these people. On the other hand, the military officers had a lower status. What was so scary about such a race and power? Perhaps as soon as his cavalry charged, these people would be frightened and flee in all directions, just like those Ming soldiers outside disorderly Well City. Didn't they flee when they saw them coming? Kun Sa treated the 5-star army as the Ming army. This was his biggest mistake. After receiving the order, He Keegan turned around and returned to the front of the army. Then, he led 50 cavalrymen and went straight to the camp of the new army. 3 miles in front of the camp, they were surrounded by hundreds of cavalrymen of the reconnaissance group. The commander, Ding Shan, rode on a maroon horse and appeared in front of He Keegan at a steady pace, blocking the cavalryman's path. Chapter 962. Go, call your Duke of Loyalty out. I have something to ask him. He Keegan rode on his horse and did not care about the cavalry that outnumbered him. Just like Kun Sa, he did not care about the great Ming dynasty's cavalry. When Ding Shan appeared, he originally wanted to ask the other party what was the matter and why they were here. He didn't think that she would be so arrogant, directly asking to see the 6th young master. She even had such an arrogant look on her face. His anger immediately flared up. Who was the 6th young master? In the hearts of the soldiers, he was like a god. In the eyes of some people, he was like a second parent. In the military camp, when you were angry or drunk, you could scold anyone. Even if you achieved outstanding military service, you could point at your superior and scold him for a while. At most, you could just apologize after sobering up and everyone would still be good brothers and comrades. However, no matter what, no one dared to speak ill of the 6th young master. This was because they would be ostracized and criticized by everyone else. In the best case, they would immediately be discharged from active service. In the worst case, they would be punished or even beheaded in public. With such a noble authority, the person who came dared to ask to see him and even acted as if it was only natural. There was no smile on Ding Shan's face. It was as if he did not understand. He asked again, "You want to see the Duke of Loyalty?" "That's right." He Keegan nodded, still with his nose in the air. "Okay, then I'll take you to see him." Ding Shan nodded. Although it was said that envoys were not killed when two armies fought, these people actually looked down on the 6th young master. This was equivalent to insulting all the soldiers of the 5-star army. This was a threshold that could not be crossed. When he heard that Ding Shan would take him to see the Duke of Loyalty, He Keegan immediately calmed down. He knew that as long as he showed his ruthless side, these Han cavalry would not dare to disobey. Well, the facts proved his conjecture. However, he did not know that his guess was not even half correct. Because in the next second, Ding Shan taught him how to be a person. He raised his right hand up high and then brought it down abruptly. "Tie them all up," he said. Even though some of the cavalrymen were prepared to resist, their resistance was futile in the face of the scouts who outnumbered them by several times. In Yang Xie's army, the strongest was naturally the Leng Feng, followed by the cavalry. The 1st Cavalry Division was even more powerful than the Cold Vanguard. In fact, when they weren't involved in sieges, they were even more powerful than the Cold Vanguard. However, there was another force that was also very strong, and that was the reconnaissance force. Being able to become a scout, especially a qualified cavalry scout, meant that they were 1 in 100. Whether it was their skills, horsemanship, or adaptability, they were all outstanding warriors. When such a group of people formed into a large scale, one could imagine how powerful such an army would be. Perhaps they were not as good as the world's #1 cavalry division, but they were definitely not too far off. Asking them to deal with the ordinary cavalry of Ili could only be described as using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. Kagan was the most pitiful. Just a moment ago, he was still arrogant and looked down on everyone. In the next moment, Ding Shan whipped him. The strong inertia coupled with the fact that he was not prepared made him fall off his horse. Following that was a series of punches and kicks. When he looked up again, his entire body was tied up with ropes and he was a captive. Not only him, but the 50 cavalrymen he brought with him were also captives. Some of the cavalrymen who resisted fiercely had a few knife wounds on their bodies. Blood dripped down mercilessly. There's no need to bandage them. That would be a waste of our resources. Send them back to the headquarters of the First Army. Ding Shan revealed a fierce gaze and gave the order. If it was any other time, he would not treat the enemy's messenger like this. After all, on the battlefield, there were always rules to follow. But today, Kagan spoke so rudely that there was no need for him to be polite anymore. Even if he were to go to the headquarters, no one would be able to say anything wrong. In fact, they might even praise him instead. In the headquarters, Commander Tiger, Mane and Deputy Commander Shibi were looking at the sand table in front of them. They were making plans for the aftermath of the emergency when they heard a soldier report that Commander Ding Shan of the reconnaissance team had arrived. Accompanying him were 50 Ili cavalry captives. Captives? I don't think we ordered a battle. Commander Tiger, Mane was puzzled. Then he shook his head. This Ding Shan, did he kidnap the enemy's messenger? That's against the rules. Commander, perhaps there's something else. Let's talk about it when we meet them. Vice Commander Shibi also smiled. Based on his understanding of Ding Shan, this person was a smooth and slick character who rarely acted impulsively. But then again, an impulsive person would never become the commander of the reconnaissance team. Then let's call them in. Tiger, Mane thought about it and decided to meet with Ding Shan first. Soon, Ding Shan entered the tent, carrying Kagan, who was tied up tightly behind his back. As soon as he came in, he threw him to the ground, causing him to fall flat on his face. Then, he saluted Hu Mang and Shibi. Commander, Deputy Commander, this person wanted to negotiate with us, but he spoke rudely. I brought him here. What's going on? Tiger, Mane's face darkened. After all, they were messengers. If there was no good reason to treat them like this, it would be unreasonable. It's like this. Ding Shan knew that he had to explain the situation clearly. Otherwise, he would be in the wrong. Therefore, he repeated what he had said to Keegan. As soon as Ding Shan finished speaking, a large foot suddenly kicked over, leaving a mark on Kagan's face. Blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Perhaps it was because he used too much force, even his snot and saliva flowed out. Needless to say, it was Tiger, Mane who kicked Kagan. How dare he disrespect the young master? Just based on this, it would not be too much to kill him. Clang! Another kick was sent out. This time, it was Shibi who did it. After being used by Yang Chendong for so long, he had always wanted to repay him. But now, someone dared to look down on the sixth young master. Based on this, if he did not kick Hikagen, he would not be able to vent his anger. Hikagen, who had been brought into the tent, thought that he had found a place to seek justice. However, he did not expect to be kicked twice in a row. The kicks were not light either. He could feel the pain on his face, but because his mouth was gagged, he could not say anything. Deputy Commander, I don't think there's any need to hesitate. Let's just attack. Tiger Mane said as if he had not vented his anger after kicking Hikagen. I think so. And once we attack, we must injure them severely. This person should be of some use. Shibi looked at Hikagen, who was lying on the ground with a face full of grievances. His eyes revealed a terrifying smile. Hikagen was unlucky. He had only said one disrespectful sentence and he was ruthlessly beaten up. What made him even more confused was that when the three Han people looked at him, they all revealed expressions of interest. Because he didn't understand Chinese, he couldn't understand what they were thinking and what they were talking about. He could only feel that there was a deeper meaning in their gazes, and he couldn't help but feel his chrysanthemum tighten. Hikagen thought too much. No one was interested in him. They were only interested in his identity and had nothing to do with his body. Then, he was brought out of the tent and his nose was cut. In the 5-star Army's military rules, this was no different from a dead person. He thought that this was a punishment from the enemy and that he was destined to die. But once again, things went beyond Hikagen's expectations. He was let go just like that. Along with him were 50 cavalrymen. But 3 of them had already become corpses due to excessive bleeding. Their horses and sabers were returned to them. Then, they were let go just like that. As if to humiliate him, Hikagen was forced to walk around the new army camp so that every soldier could see his miserable state. Knowing that he was being humiliated, Hikagen's eyes were filled with tears but his gaze was resolute. This was because he was using this method to observe the 5-star Army's camp. Needless to say, he gained quite a lot. For example, he saw many soldiers eating and drinking together. Some even fell asleep in the open space of the camp. But in the face of all this, no one cared. Just you wait. With such lax military discipline, you will not be a match for our 30,000 cavalrymen. I will definitely take revenge for this humiliation. Hikagen thought hatefully in his heart. After a round of running around the barracks, it was already afternoon. He and Keegan were released. Once he was a mile away from the 5-star Army's reconnaissance team, Hikagen spurred his horse and rushed back to his own camp. There was only one thing left in his heart, revenge. In the Ili camp, Kun Sa was waiting for news. When he arrived, he saw Hikagen with blood on his face. After taking off his black scarf, he looked terrifying. When he saw him, Kun Sa immediately asked, "Who are you?" Just this one sentence made Hikagen cry. "General, look carefully. I am your vanguard, Hikagen." "Ah. You are Hikagen. How did you end up like this?" Kun Sa was puzzled. He really could not understand. Hikagen was fine when he went out. How did he come back with a face covered in blood? He could not even recognize him. At that moment, Hikagen told Kun Sa everything that had happened to him. Of course, he did not exaggerate. In short, the 5-star Army was too arrogant. They did not follow the rules at all and did not take their 30,000 cavalrymen seriously. Most importantly, their military discipline was very lax. Chapter 963. Lack of discipline? How do you know that? Kun Sa caught the main point. They wanted to humiliate me. After cutting off my nose, they walked around the camp. What they didn't know was that I saw their true colors. Oh, some of the soldiers were eating and drinking. Some of them were sleeping in broad daylight. They didn't look like an army that was good at war. General, as long as you give me 5,000 cavalrymen, I will be able to break their morale with a single charge. I will be able to defeat them and make them flee in all directions. Kagan said confidently. Good, good. Kun Sa laughed when he finally heard some useful information. He had never believed that the Han cavalry would be so powerful. In his eyes, the reason why they said that was because they did not want him to be the first one to gain merit. That was why they said that, to scare him. Now that Kagan saw it with his own eyes, he believed in his own judgment even more. The sky was getting dark, and it was just past the 15th day of the month. The moon was bright, and he had the idea of sneaking into the camp. I order. Kun Sa's confident voice came from the tent. In the camp of the new army, Tiger's man and Shibi had come up with 2 battle plans. They gathered all the officers above the regimental level and announced their orders. Finally, there was a big battle to fight. All the officers were very excited. It had been 2 years since they eliminated Fan Yuhai and unified the Mongolian tribes in the north of the Gobi Desert. During this period of time, they had been constantly training their troops and were itching for a fight. Now that they finally had a chance to show off their skills, none of them wanted to give it up. Everyone took the initiative to be the main attacker, 30,000 cavalrymen. There's no need to fight. Everyone will have meat to eat. But I'll say this first. If anyone dares to retreat during a battle, they'll only be fit to be the reserve team the next time there's a mission. Tiger's man glanced at every officer in the meeting. There was a warning and reminder in his eyes. Don't worry, Commander. This is our new army's chance to shine again. We won't let you down. That's right. If our light cavalry regiment dropped the chain and let them escape, then you can take my head as the regiment commander. If I can't break through the enemy's battle formation in the first charge, I don't want my head anymore. All the officers spoke one by one, made their stand, and even made military orders. Tiger's mane nodded excitedly. All right, I'll remember what you've said. Please remember that military law is merciless. If there's a problem, you'll have to be prepared to be punished by military law. Tiger's mane couldn't be blamed for being so careful. There hadn't been any major battles in the past 2 years, and many of the new soldiers in the army hadn't really seen blood. Although the training had been targeted, a real battlefield and a drill were 2 completely different things. Any underestimation of the enemy could cause irreparable losses. In order to eliminate the enemy, she and the military staff made a total of 2 plans. The first plan was that if the enemy attacked the camp at night, they would beat them at their own game. The second plan was that if the enemy didn't attack the camp, they would charge at dawn. That was when the enemy's defense was at its weakest. The night came as expected. The moon hung high in the sky, shining down on the grassland. It allowed Ili to see the army clearly from afar. At the same time, their movements were perfectly captured by the scouts. They're here, they're here. They're really moving out. After the scouts reported the news to the military, Tiger's man rubbed his hands in excitement. However, when he heard that the enemy only had 5,000 cavalry, he couldn't help but reveal a disappointed expression. They only sent so few troops. It's not enough. Commander, don't worry. They're obviously looking down on us. Since that's the case, we just need to advance to the second plan. She seemed to have understood the thoughts of his opponent. He must have let Keegan slip around during the day to show his weakness. Since that was the case, he would let them know the consequences of trusting his own eyes. Yes, that's right. Tiger's man nodded heavily. He then looked at the messenger and said, "Order the direct troops to stay behind and attack the enemy. The Tatar division will flank the enemy from the left flank. The recruit division will flank the enemy from the right flank. The light cavalry division will circle the enemy from the rear. The heavy cavalry division, the scouts, and the military will charge at the enemy from the front in an hour. Once the 2 red signal flares are used, the entire army will attack. After the order was given, a few messengers moved out and spread the news that the second plan was to be carried out in advance. Immediately, the various divisions and regiments that were already prepared on the outskirts of the camp all went to their respective destinations. Only the direct troops were left behind to prepare for an ambush. Keegan's face was wrapped in a black cloth, covering his somewhat frightening face. He led 5,000 cavalry and charged straight at the enemy. When he was only a mile away from the camp of the new army, he still didn't see anyone appear to stop him. He only saw a few 5-star army soldiers that were in charge of night patrol running around. He couldn't help but let out a victorious smile. Everything was as he had expected. The new army was just for show. He didn't think that they would dare to attack at night. Since that was the case, he would kill to his heart's content and take revenge for what happened during the day. All of you, charge. It's time to kill the enemy. He raised his saber high and laughed heartily with Kagan. He followed the first echelon into the barracks of the new army. Then, he bent his body slightly and chopped at the curtain of a tent. He forcefully tore a hole nearly 10 feet wide in it. However, the expected scene of the enemy sleeping soundly or panicking didn't appear. With the help of the bonfire in the camp, they saw an empty tent. Not to mention a single person, there wasn't even a blanket to be seen. This was clearly an empty military tent. There was nothing inside. Just from this point alone, it was clear that no one had lived in it. One of the tents was empty. Kagan had a bad feeling about this, but he still continued to cut down a few more tents. Reality told him that there were no opponents in any of the tents, nor were there any items. At this moment, no matter how stupid he was, he knew that this was an empty tent. In other words, he had been tricked. Not good, this is the enemy's trap. Retreat. Seeing that his hopes were dashed, Kagan felt a chill run down his spine. Kagan shouted for the army to retreat. Even if they wanted to retreat now, it was clearly too late. Because right at this moment, countless cavalry suddenly appeared in the darkness around the large tent, each of them holding fiery bows. Under the loud shout of Commander Dengyu, round after round of fire arrows flew through the air, landing in the midst of the 5,000 cavalry under the command of the Li army. The flaming arrows were like meteors streaking across the sky, landing on the cavalrymen. One by one, the soldiers screamed, howled, fell off their horses, rolled on the ground, or galloped away aimlessly, knocking down their comrades one after another. Under the rain of fire arrows, the 5,000 cavalrymen's formation was thrown into chaos, drowning out Kagan's order to retreat. All units, charge. Dengyu pulled out his saber after firing 3 arrows in a row. With a loud shout, he led the charge towards the surrounded cavalrymen. What followed was the sound of thousands of horses galloping from each camp. One side came prepared, while the other side was panicking. One side had high morale, while the other side had no will to fight. This was not a fair battle to begin with. After a few charges, the 5,000 cavalrymen of the Li army were either dead or injured. The outcome was decided. In the main camp of the Li army, one could vaguely see the flames of the new army camp a few miles away. Vice General Wu Liji smiled as he reported the good news to General Kun Sa. "General, it seems like Kagan has succeeded." I've already said that the Han cavalrymen are nothing to be afraid of." Kun Sa laughed as if everything was within his expectations. "General, should we do something too? Why don't I bring a group of cavalrymen to support them? After all, there are more than 20,000 enemies. Even if it's to capture prisoners, we'll need help." Wu Liji took the opportunity to say. Obviously, he did not want to see Kagan take all the glory and steal all the credit. Kun Sa knew what he was thinking. With 5,000 cavalrymen, capturing several times the number of enemies would not be difficult. However, as a general, he had to learn to be fair. Otherwise, he would not be able to convince his subordinates. Kun Sa nodded and said, "All right, I'm a little worried about He Keegan. How about this, I'll give you 5,000 cavalrymen. Go and help them." "Thank you, General." Wu Liji placed his right hand on his left chest and bowed. He then turned and strode away. Kun Sa, on the other hand, was humming a tune that only he could understand. He had a contented look on his face. At this time, he could not help but fantasize about his bright future after this meritorious deed. He thought about how Yeshen had said more than once that the 5-star army was not to be trifled with. However, this time, he had used his actions to give the other party a slap in the face. He wanted to see what else this person had to say this time. "Huh." Kun Sa, who was overjoyed, said something that made people smile. "If you don't fight, you won't know that our Ili army's cavalrymen are so powerful." Kun Sa's beautiful dream did not last long. After a quarter of an hour, Wu Liji suddenly returned from the tent. "What's wrong? You haven't set off yet?" Kun Sa was somewhat displeased that he had taken a quarter of an hour to prepare. With this kind of speed, he still wants to take the credit? "General, something bad has happened. Something bad has happened. As soon as I led the army out, we ran into the main force of the 5-star army. Each of them was armed with a 3-meter-long saber and was covered in heavy armor. We were no match for them and lost." Wu Liji's face was filled with anxiety and guilt. Chapter 964. "Huh? What did you say?" Kun Sa slammed the wooden table in front of him, his face full of anger. "What the hell is going on? How can there be the 5-star army in front of us? Weren't they heavily injured by General Keegan?" "I don't know." Wu Liji shook his head. This time, he was not lying. He really did not know anything. As soon as the army came out, they bumped into the new army of heavy cavalry. Their equipment and combat power were not as good as the enemy's, so they were defeated in just one confrontation. How could they figure out what happened? Fortunately, Wu Liji did not need to explain anything. Scouts poured into the tent one by one. "General, we found enemies on the left side of the army." "General, we found enemies on the right side of the army." "General, we found enemies on the right side of the army." What's going on? Where did so many enemies come from? Can anyone explain to me? With a face full of anger, Kun Sa slammed the wooden table in front of him several times. The wooden table was on the verge of collapse, as if it would collapse at any time. Following this shout, the tent was so silent that even a pin drop could be heard. Obviously, no one knew how to answer this question. This result was completely different from what they had expected, and it made them unable to think for a while. But the truth would answer everything. A flaming arrow suddenly shot into the main tent, and the flames rose. Soon, the tent was burned to a crisp, and the temperature in the main tent rose. Wu Liji also shouted, "Not good, the 5-star army is coming. General, quickly give the order to retreat." "Retreat?" Yes, retreat." After a moment of shock, Kun Sa gave the order to retreat. At this moment, he did not have time to think about why there were so many 5-star army in his camp. Now, he only thought about how to escape and save his life. 2 red signal flares were fired into the sky. Originally, only the 5-star army had entered the barracks. However, not long after, the 5-star army appeared from all directions. They held fire arrows and set fire to the barracks one after another, causing the horses to whine incessantly. Many of the cavalrymen in the Ili army couldn't even get on their horses. They were either shot to death, burned to death, killed, or captured. Fortunately, it was night time. Kun Sa and Wuli Ji led 5,000 cavalrymen and charged in one direction. Eventually, they managed to force their way out. After losing 2,000 cavalrymen, they managed to break through the encirclement of the light cavalry regiment. The light cavalry regiment had always been known for their speed. Frontal clashes on the battlefield were not their forte. In the end, Commander Ma Xiangshan could only watch the enemy retreat and sigh loudly. The massacre in the barracks was still ongoing. The results of the new army's training in the past 2 years were proven on the battlefield. The soldiers raised their sabers, waved their arms, and demonstrated what they had learned in their daily training. They treated the living enemy cavalrymen in front of them as scarecrows on the training ground, repeatedly cutting them down. These new soldiers who had joined the battlefield in the past 2 years were already qualified in terms of organization, discipline, and individual qualities. Now, they only lacked actual combat experience to kill the enemy and see more blood. Tonight's battle made up for their shortcomings and gave them the opportunity to grow into qualified and even excellent soldiers. The battle lasted until noon the next day, and the Ili army was completely defeated. In this battle, they killed more than 6,000 enemies and captured more than 20,000 enemies. The new army's actual actions once again made a great contribution, and their reputation spread far and wide. Poor Kun Sa came with 30,000 soldiers, but when he escaped, he only had 3,000. Other than the war horses and the sabers in his hands, he left everything behind. It could be said that he was battered and exhausted. Reality gave them a solid slap in the face, and they finally realized that the Wallace Yeshen was right. The 5-star army was indeed not to be trifled with. Kun Sa led 3,000 cavalrymen and retreated like crazy. They retreated to Jianghu city, which was 300 miles away. There, they met the Walla army, who had already occupied the city. Only then did they feel relieved. When they completely relaxed, Kun Sa's anger rose again. This time, although he was defeated by the 5-star army, he was defeated by the enemy's conspiracy. The two sides did not fight face to face, and this made him very unconvinced. Therefore, after a good night's rest, he went to see the Wara leader Yeshen in Jianghu city and expressed his intention to join the 5-star army in World War II. Compared to 6 years ago, Yeshen had become a lot more mature, especially after Tuachuo Buhua was killed by him. The aura of a superior was even stronger. In the courtyard of the former Jianghu city government office, Yeshen met with Kun Sa. When he heard that Kun Sa wanted to send troops to inflict heavy losses on the 5-star army and avenge more than 20,000 of his soldiers, he did not refuse. Instead, he asked politely, "How many cavalrymen does General Kun Sa have now?" 3,000, but they are all elites, Kun Sa answered without hesitation. "Oh, only 3,000 cavalrymen? I thought General Kun Sa had 300,000 cavalrymen." After chuckling coldly, he suddenly roared, "I don't care what kind of status you had in the past. Right now, you are nothing more than a small general with 3,000 cavalry. Where did you get the confidence to speak to me like this? Men, throw him out of the courtyard." Yeshen's sudden change in attitude made Kun Sa's expression very ugly. He still wanted to struggle, but more than a dozen new soldiers rushed forward and lifted him up. They carried him out of the courtyard and threw him onto the street. It was also at this moment that Kun Sa remembered Yeshen's character. This was a man who only cared about benefits and benefits. For benefits and benefits, he would even kill his own brothers at any time. Coming into contact with such a person was like asking a tiger for its skin. After being thrown out of the courtyard, Kun Sa was helped up by the soldiers waiting outside the courtyard. He then left with an angry look on his face. He left Jianghu city and went straight to the rear. He had already received news that Ili's army was coming from the direction of Ili city, which was his real home. Someone told Yeshen the news of Kun Sa's departure, but he was not moved. He had to admit that he was indeed afraid of Yang Chendong from the bottom of his heart. Unless it was necessary, he did not want to make an enemy of Yang Chendong. Kun Sa, with only 3,000 cavalrymen, wanted to ally with him. He would not do such a stupid thing. What he needed to think about now was how to drive Baiming's army out of the grasslands. For example, the nearby Sambulaquan would be his next target. Sambulaquan City. Shi Huanshan, the chief of the Xian mansion, who had retreated in defeat, returned here with nearly 190,000 defeated soldiers. Originally, he wanted to reorganize here and then launch a counterattack to retake Jingzhou City and Shajing City. However, he did not expect the Datong army to be defeated so quickly. He was not ready yet, and Walla's main force was already in front of him. Not only did they take over Jingzhou City and Shajing City, which he had abandoned, but they also threatened the safety of Sambulaquan City. In other words, even if Shi Huanshan wanted to retreat now, he had to be prepared for an attack when he left Sambulaquan City. Shi Huanshan, who was originally ambitious, felt a little sad that the war had reached this stage. He hated the officials of the imperial court, who only knew how to pursue their own interests and did not care about the overall situation. He hated the incompetence of Datong's chief of the army, Yang Hong. If he did not have such a big appetite, he would not have surrounded Chaojing City and instead thought of a way to take it down. Then, he would have been able to resist the allied forces of Walla and Ili. This would have created an opportunity for him to take down Shajing City and reach the rear of Walla. At that time, the opportunity for the decisive battle would have arrived. But now, the defeated army had become a fact. How difficult would it be to find the same opportunity as before? Shi Huanshan seemed to be somewhat dispirited. The expressions of the two deputy commanders beside him, Gu He and Ning Wenfeng, were not much better. However, the eunuch in charge, also known as the military supervisor eunuch, Deng Chang, said in his croaky voice, "Generals, the emperor has already sent someone to deliver an 800-li urgent message. He said that the court is currently sending reinforcements. This time, with Governor Shiheng as the leader, they will assist us and send troops to the grasslands. Our current mission is to defend Sanbuji River. We have to be like a nail nailed into this place. If we dare to retreat, we will be punished according to military law." After saying this, Deng Chang could not help but let out a sigh. Although he didn't know much about military affairs, he knew how difficult it was for a lone city to defend until reinforcements arrived. In history, there might be people who relied on a city and defended it for half a year or even longer. But without exception, those who defended it were all big cities with enough provisions to last them for a long time. In contrast, Sambulaquan did not have such conditions. The city walls were low, only about 20 feet high. Scaling ladders could easily be placed on top of the city walls. The provisions in the city were not sufficient, and even the water supply was not enough to satisfy the needs of the army. Under such conditions, it would be a big problem for anyone to defend it. Report. While the four of them were still hesitating about what to do next, a scout suddenly came to report that 30,000 soldiers had defeated the 5-star army. The main general, Kun Sa, only managed to escape with 3,000 soldiers. When the news came out, Shi Huanshan and the other three generals' expressions became even more complicated. In contrast, the 5-star army had won a great battle, but they had just suffered a great defeat. This stark contrast made them even more depressed and anxious. In the silent room, the deputy chief, Ancient River, suddenly said, "The 5-star army has fully grown. Even if we can defeat the Walla and the Ili one day, how are we going to deal with the 5-star army? Who is their opponent?" Chapter 965. Speaking of which, Gu He could be considered a valiant general. Among the 200,000 soldiers of the Xian mansion, even Shi Huanshan was slightly inferior to him. Usually, he was the one who shouted the loudest, as if he didn't put the heroes of the world in his eyes. But now, he actually asked this question. This was enough to show that he was a little afraid. Ancient River's words made the originally quiet room seem even quieter. Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng didn't say anything. They didn't know what to say or how to answer this question. Only Deng Chang, the eunuch, suddenly said after a moment of silence, "General Ancient, what do you mean? Could it be that you're afraid?" As a eunuch, he only had one person to back him up, and that was the emperor. Anyone who disobeyed him would become his enemy. It was only because they were on good terms that Deng Chang normally didn't dare to say such things. If it was anyone else who dared to say such things, Deng Chang probably would have already called for soldiers to arrest them. "I'm afraid? What a joke. On the battlefield, when have I not led the soldiers? I'm just talking about something we'll have to face sooner or later." Faced with Deng Chang's question, Ancient River naturally wouldn't back down. In the face of a great enemy, if there was any internal strife, the situation in the city would be even worse. As the commander, Shi Wanshan finally opened his mouth and said, all right. These are just private words. They can't be taken seriously. We should think about how to deal with the current situation and how to deal with the Walla cavalry. The emperor has already said that we can't lose Sanbu Lichuan. Otherwise, we'll be punished by military law. Since it's like this, if you don't want to die, quickly come up with a plan. It's not easy to defend. Without enough provisions, the morale of the army will fall into chaos as time goes on. Ning Wenfeng, who was famous for being a wise man, shook his head. We can have Tala think of a way to supply us with provisions. Also, this place isn't far from Datong Prefecture. We can think of something from there. Deng Chang also suggested. After following Shi Wanshan for so long, he wasn't a complete novice when it came to military matters. He more or less had some common sense. Datong Prefecture? He. Hearing this, Ning Wenfeng shook his head. Right now, their main force has retreated to the Ningxia Guard. They must be scared out of their wits. It's impossible for them to support us. I fear that they don't even have the courage to open the city gates. As for Tulu City, we can order them, but once we leave, there aren't that many guards left there to begin with. It's already not bad for them to be able to defend the city. They will be able to hold on. Duke Zhongdan won't let anyone take Tulu and threaten the Han people. Shi Wanshan interjected with certainty when this topic was brought up. This was also what he was not worried about. Perhaps the emperor had also seen this point. Otherwise, he would not have ordered them to defend Sambulakwin to the death. Instead, he would have ordered them to retreat to Tulu City. Regardless of how great of a threat Yang Chendong was to all sides and how fast his power rose, there was one thing that was not wrong. He had taken care of the great Ming people, or rather, the Han people. This situation was seen by everyone. Since this was the case, with his temper, there was no reason for him to allow Tulu City to be attacked. On this point, even Shi Wanshan was full of admiration for him. When it came to Yang Chendong, Ancient River interjected, "Hey, do you guys think we can have someone send a letter to the Duke of Loyalty and ask them to transport supplies for us? Others might be afraid of the Walla and Ili allied forces, but the 5-star army shouldn't be afraid. Is that okay? The 5-star army doesn't have many troops in Origin City. Do they have this kind of ability?" Deng Chang also heard the interest and asked. "Don't think about it. It's impossible." Ning Wenfeng refuted. Afraid that the two would not believe him, he then explained, "Everyone is not stupid. We should be able to see the ambition of the Duke of Loyalty. In the future, there will be a day when we will become enemies. Since we are enemies, it would be good if they don't step on us when we are in dire straits. How can they support us? Besides, do we have money to pay them? If I remember correctly, the Emperor still owes the Duke of Loyalty 11 million taels of silver." As Ning Wenfeng spoke, the expressions of Shi Wanshan and the others constantly changed. Especially the eunuch Deng Chang, his expression was very unsightly. After all, his master owed the other party money and was not firm in his words. He was only a small chess piece in his master's eyes. What else could he say? The four of them sat for an entire afternoon and still couldn't come up with a better idea. In the end, Shi Wanshan could only say, "Forget it. It's a blessing, not a curse. Let's just hand over the problem. Since the emperor wants us to guard here, there are some things that can be solved with help. Otherwise, we can't blame anyone if we can't defend the city. By the way, I have to trouble eunuch Deng with this matter. You know the situation in the city. The army can only eat for 20 days at most. After 20 days, I'm afraid the city will collapse. This eunuch knows. I will go back and write a secret report to the emperor." Deng Chong said seriously. This was no longer a matter of whether or not he could complete the task. It was related to his own life. He couldn't help but take it seriously. First city, Yang Mansion. The new army had won another great battle, killing and capturing nearly 30,000 enemies. The news of victory was sent to Yang Chendong. He just glanced at it and put it aside. This was within his expectations. If the new army couldn't defeat the enemy, then it wouldn't be called the new army. Ili underestimated the enemy, so it was only a matter of time before they were defeated. He wasn't worried. What he needed to consider now was the changing situation in front of him and what he needed to do. For example, what kind of changes would happen to the situation on the battlefield? Yang Chendong was a person who liked to take 3 steps at a time. This time, the sudden appearance of Ili's cavalry was beyond his expectation. It was also not within his plan. However, since they had appeared, of course, he wouldn't be polite. That was why he ordered the new army to attack. Facts proved that they won this battle without any suspense. However, this didn't mean that there was no problem. On the contrary, what Ili would do next was a problem that he needed to consider. Only by estimating all the possibilities and making preparations could they ensure that the 5-star army would be able to face everything safely during the mission. All along, Yang Chendong had been doing this. Every battle under his command didn't seem to require much effort or danger. However, this was the result of his careful calculations and strategies. Otherwise, even if he had weapons that were a few hundred years ahead of this era, he wouldn't be able to achieve such great results in such a short time. Then the problem appeared. What would Ili do next? Would he choose to swallow this loss silently or send out a large number of troops for revenge? 4 years ago, he left Baiming's capital in the name of returning to his hometown to pay respects to his ancestors. He left to help the southern Ming Empire deal with the Yellow Bandits. Since then, he had started his own journey. The only difference was that the farmers earned grain, the merchants earned money, and the politicians earned reputation. What he earned was merely a country. To build a country, it wasn't as simple as fighting and killing. Wasn't there an old saying that went, "It's easy to conquer the world, but hard to defend the world"? How to manage these territories well and use them well was the time to show one's true ability. Fortunately, with the experience of the later generations and some of the goods in the warehouse, he was able to create a lot of value. With money, it was easy to do things, and the territory he conquered was stable. But after all, his foundation was too weak, so the local management couldn't keep up with the pace of his expansion. Just like now, he could command his troops and had the ability to conquer more territory, but how to defend it had become a big problem. For example, the territory in front of him wasn't small, and it was vast but sparsely populated. Once he defeated the enemy's main cavalry, it wouldn't be difficult to occupy it. Similarly, because the territory was vast but sparsely populated, the number of civilians needed was really difficult for him. In other words, he had the ability to defeat the enemy, but he didn't have the strength to occupy the enemy. Even so, now was the time to occupy Ili, which meant that it wasn't the time to fight the enemy. Sigh, I used a lot of effort to defeat the enemy, but I can't ask for any benefits. It's really not interesting. With a sigh, Yang Chendong called Beta Persei. He wanted to send a message to the Mabe army thousands of miles away and ask them to do something. Yang Chendong was calculating. He needed time to accumulate enough strength, such as excellent management personnel after occupying a piece of land, the people who needed to move in and out, the development of this area in the future, what kind of factory to build, what kind of sunshine to point to for the people, and so on. Like him, Baiming was also calculating. In the capital of Baiming, the ministers reached a consensus at the court meeting. Sanbu Lichuan must be defended. Only in this way could they give Governor Shiheng enough time to prepare for a big battle with Walla on the grassland and win the final victory. The consensus was reached, but the situation in Sanbu Lichuan was there. The city was not big, the city walls were not high, and the food and water stored inside were very limited. With such a medium-sized city, it was impossible to stop the combined forces of Walla and Nili Ali. Commander Shi is a general who can fight. The Battle of Xian Mansion and the Battle of Tulu City have proven his ability. Now he has nearly 200,000 troops in his hands. As long as the provisions can keep up, there shouldn't be a problem to defend the city. At the court meeting, Minister of War Yi Ming stood up and expressed his opinion. Yi Ming's words attracted the silent support of many other ministers. But then Minister of Works Shi Pu stood up. Minister Yi is right, but the key problem is how to guarantee the provision on time. Chapter 966. Yes. Where is Minister Jin? How are the preparations for General Shi's army of 200,000 going? Sitting on the golden dragon throne, Zhu Qiyu nodded. His gaze turned toward the Minister of Appointments. Jin Lian stood in the group of officials. Hearing Dai Zong call out his name, he immediately stepped forward with a board in his hand and said, "Your Majesty, the provisions have already been transported to the Xian Manor. According to what I know, a portion of the provisions will move with the army. A portion of the provisions need to be transported to the front lines once every 3 to 5 days. Based on this, most of the provisions should still be in the Xian Manor. Then send it over." Hearing that the provisions had already been prepared, Zhu Qiyu's face was filled with joy. However, after saying this, he realized that the entire hall had suddenly fallen silent. It was as if there was something wrong with what he had said. Fortunately, there were some officials who were good at understanding people's hearts. Minister of Justice Su Yozhen stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, the difficulty right now is that the provisions can't be transported up. Presumably, the area around Sanbu Lichuan should be filled with Yeshen's cavalry. If we send them up now, it's no different from sending sheep into a tiger's den." "Yes, yes." Zhu Qiyu's face turned bright red. Although he had already been the emperor for 6 years, he had never been on the battlefield. His understanding of war was only from what he read in books. After Su Yozhen's reminder, he knew that what he had just said was a bit too hasty. His face turned red. In order to eliminate the effects of what had just happened, he thought of a way to divert everyone's attention. He looked at Shiheng in the group of generals and said, "Governor Shi, when will the newly gathered 200,000 soldiers be gathered and sent to the battlefield?" "Your Majesty." Shiheng bowed and said, "The gathering time will take around 15 days. After all, 200,000 people is not a small number. As for when they will be able to reach the battlefield, if they rely on their legs, it will probably take another 1.5 months to reach Sanbu Lichuan. However, if I work hard, 2 months should be enough." 2 months. This answer caused the officials who were participating in the court meeting to whisper to each other and discuss spiritedly. If it really took 2 months, Sanbuchuan might really fall. If that was the case, the 200,000 soldiers in the city would be devoured. This would undoubtedly be a heavy blow to Baiming's military strength. On the dragon throne, Zhu Qiyu shook her head. "I'm afraid 2 months won't be enough. How about this, if anyone has any way to transport the provisions to Sanbu Lichuan, feel free to share it." The ministers couldn't help but shake their heads like rattle drums. To break through the formation of the Walla cavalry and transport so much grain into the city, there was only one word to describe it: difficult. After waiting for a long time, no one came forward to provide advice. This made Zhu Qiyu very angry. Normally, all of them would claim to be patriotic ministers and would love to dig out their hearts for him to see. Or perhaps he was more capable than Guan Zhong and Yu Yi. However, when faced with a difficult problem, all they did was shake their heads. How could Zhu Qiyu not be disappointed? After a while of discussion, the hall became quiet again. It was clear that no one had thought of a better idea. Seeing the reaction of the ministers and thinking about the fiery military situation ahead, Zhu Qiyu couldn't help but get angry. She slammed her hand on the dragon table and asked loudly, "My dear ministers, you are all the smartest and most capable people in the world. Don't tell me that even you don't have a better idea?" These words made the old ministers blush. However, there were some thick-skinned ones whose faces didn't change. To them, what they learned was how to govern the world and how to govern the country with benevolence and righteousness. It wasn't some military book. It had to be said that this was the so-called Confucianism. It was just a theory within a theory. The more one read, the better one could write some good articles. This was also the use of it. They could pass the imperial examinations and obtain the qualifications to become an official. Then, they would slowly waste their time and accumulate experience. Finally, they would become the so-called minister who governed the country. With such people, it was no wonder that the common people lived in an abyss of suffering. The hall was still silent. Zhu Qiyu's expression became more and more unsightly. He once again felt a sense of isolation and helplessness. He once again understood what it meant to regret not having enough help when it was time to use it. In the moment of silence, a voice suddenly sounded. Dressed in a second-rank official's robe, Minister of Justice Su Yozhen stepped out of his office and said, "Your Majesty, actually, if you want to transport provisions to Sanbuchuan City, it isn't that troublesome. As long as one person is willing to agree, this matter is simple." Someone stepped out. This already made Zhu Qiyu very happy. The person who stepped out even thought of a solution. Zhu Qiyu immediately asked, "Beloved Minister Su, do you have a good idea? Quickly say it." Among the officials, the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao, had been standing there with his eyes closed. When he saw Su Yozhen step out, his originally unconcerned expression instantly changed. His brows couldn't help but furrow together, but then slowly relax. Yang Chendong had already told him that Su Yozhen was also a person of the same path. However, in these past few years, the two didn't have much contact. Perhaps it was because they didn't feel at ease with each other. They only silently cooperated with each other on some matters. If they could cooperate, they would also silently support each other in private. Hu Shao naturally understood Su Yozhen a little. He was smart, discerning, able to see the situation clearly, and had smooth and slick methods. However, him stepping out at this time was still out of Hu Zhao's expectations. He had already guessed what this person wanted to say. However, was it really good to involve Yang Chendong in this matter? The opponent this time was the allied cavalry of the Walla cavalry and the Ili cavalry. Did the five-star army really have the strength to stop them? However, with Su Yozhen's personality, he rarely fought a battle that he wasn't confident in. Could it be that he had received Yang Chendong's secret order and wanted to take the initiative to participate in such a big event to share some benefits, or was it all his own idea? While Hu Shao was still guessing, Su Yozhen had already stepped out. He crossed his arms and said, "Your Majesty, if you want to resolve this situation, the only way is to ask the Duke of Loyalty. There is no other way." The Duke of Loyalty? Zhu Qiyu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, originally had a face full of expectation. At this moment, his expression became somewhat ugly. It was unknown when it started, but in the court of Baiming, the words Duke of Loyalty had become a taboo. If it wasn't necessary, no one would mention it. Perhaps everyone knew that this person's influence was so great that it threatened the survival and development of Baiming. However, this person's influence had already reached a certain level. He was no longer someone that could be casually suppressed. Since there was no way to deal with him, it was better not to mention him. This could be considered as out of sight, out of mind. But now, Su Yozhen had broken this rule and took the initiative to mention him. An extremely clear expression of displeasure flashed across Dai Zong's face. The Duke of Loyalty? How could he have such an ability? Zhu Qiyu's voice carried a trace of dissatisfaction. Listen to the sound of gongs and drums. The ability of the officials to observe people's expressions was not small. Seeing that the emperor was a bit angry, the smartest thing to do was to immediately stop this topic. However, Su Yozhen had no way out now. Ever since Yang Qindong appeared in the capital of Baiming and saw him at night, Su Yozhen, who had been wavering, knew that he had already boarded Yang Xie's ship. It was likely that it would be impossible for him to get off. The only thing he could do was to think of a way to prevent this ship from sinking in the sea and find a way to sail further. After understanding this in his heart, he took the initiative to cooperate with Yang Xie. For example, when the Five-Star Army attacked North Korea, many of the officials in the court criticized the Five-Star Army for attacking a vassal state of the Ming Dynasty. This was clearly a form of disrespect to the Ming Dynasty. Not only did he not make a fuss with these people, he even privately found the Daizong Emperor and said that North Korea was not part of the Ming Dynasty. Even if it was taken away, there was no real loss. It would be better to use this opportunity to ask the Five-Star Army for some warhorses. After all, strength was the way of the king. As long as he had enough strength, he could take back what he lost sooner or later. It was Su Yozhen who came up with this idea. He originally wanted to reprimand the Five-Star Army and even the Daizong Emperor who sent troops from Liaodong to support North Korea. He thought that compared to the vassal state being captured, it was more important to strengthen oneself. After all, North Korea was not the first vassal state to be captured. Zhu Qiyu agreed, and Su Yozhen joined forces with some courtiers who were on good terms with him. In the end, when they finally took down the Joseon dynasty, Yang Qindong only had to pay the price of 50,000 warhorses. Moreover, it wasn't for free. It was a loan to the northern Ming dynasty, which had to be converted into silver and returned in the future. Of course, he owed too much. It was hard to say whether he could pay it back, but at least he owed money in name. The Five-Star Army actually captured North Korea in such a short period of time. This matter also made Su Yozhen have a further understanding of Yang Qindong's strength and understanding. After all, it was just some small countries in the south. It could be said that the barren land was occupied, and its influence was far from being so big. Then how powerful was the Five-Star Army? Su Yozhen had an idea. If possible, he wanted to go to the grassland's first city to take a look. He wanted to see what kind of scale Yang Xie's development had reached. If he wanted to go, he needed a dignified reason. Now that Sanbuchuan was surrounded and in danger, he saw this as an opportunity. Su Yozhen stood up and spoke to the emperor. There was another reason why Su Yozhen had the courage to stand up. He believed that Yang Qindong did not want to see the 200,000 Baiming soldiers in Sanbuchuan get eaten by the grassland's foreign tribes. It was to cater to this idea that he chose to take the initiative to attack. Chapter 967. Your Majesty, Sanbulachuan is not far from the first city. Since the Duke of Zhongwei can gain a foothold there, he must have military strength as his backing. If we can ask him to help, it shouldn't be a big problem for him to only transport grain and not help in the war. Su Yozhen stood up and said in a guessing tone. The important thing was that he emphasized one thing, which was that Yang Qindong would not help Baiming. He would only help to transport the grain. He said this in order to stop Zhu Qiyu's mouth and make things clear first. It might be possible to help transport the grain, but helping Baiming to fight the Wara was not worth mentioning. Because this was not Yang Chendong's intention. Originally, when Zhu Qiyu heard Yang Chendong's name, he had such an idea and asked the Duke of Zhongwei to send troops to help. Your title was given to you by the Great Ming Dynasty. Now that the Great Ming Dynasty was in trouble, it was not too much to ask for your troops. But when he heard Su Yozhen's words, he knew that he might have thought too much. However, he still wanted to try harder. After all, if Yang Chendong was really willing to participate in the war, whether they could win the war or not, at least they could get someone to share the firepower. But before Zhu Qiyu could speak, Governor Shiheng had already stood up. He cupped his fist and said, "Your Majesty, Minister Su's words are very reasonable. The Duke of Zhongwei can help us transport the grain. As long as we defend Sanbulachuan for 2 months, our army will arrive. At that time, the situation will be completely one-sided. At that time, our army's victory will be expected, and our Baiming army will not need any help." Shiheng suddenly stood up, not because he had discussed it with Su Yozhen in advance. He just didn't want Yang Chendong to take advantage of it. In his eyes, Baiming's army was powerful and invincible. One day, even the Duke of Zhongwei and his 5-star army would be trampled under his feet. But if he owed the other side a big favor now, how could he fight the war in the future? Shiheng was looking at things from a long-term perspective, which was why he said those words. As the main representative of the military, Zhu Qiyu knew that it was impossible to ask the Duke of Loyalty to send troops to participate in the battle. He could only nod his head and say, "All right, since that's the case, Minister Su, in your opinion, who should be sent to the Duke of Loyalty and Courage?" As he spoke, Zhu Qiyu's gaze swept across the group of courtiers. Unfortunately, many of the officials did not even raise their heads. In their hearts, asking for help from the Duke of Loyalty was not a good task. "Your Majesty, this idea was thought of by this subject, so this subject is naturally willing to go." Su Yozhen wanted to take this opportunity to test Yang Chendong's strength. Naturally, she wanted to go. Since the other courtiers were unwilling to go, it saved him a lot of effort and he didn't have to worry about anyone competing with him. It was Su Yozhen who took the initiative to step forward. Zhu Qiyu was overjoyed. Thinking of seeing a loyal official in a time of danger, he couldn't help but value Su Yozhen more. Thinking that this person had been promoted by him after he ascended to the throne, perhaps there would be a chance to put her in an important position. Immediately, he announced Su Yozhen as an imperial envoy to go to Shi City to discuss with the Duke of Loyalty and Courage the matter of assisting Sanbulachuan City with provisions. For the sake of convenience, he gave Su Yozhen the power to act and the power to mobilize the soldiers of Xianfu. Su Yozhen immediately knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live the Emperor!" Zhu Qiyu, who was very satisfied, was even happier. He nodded lightly at Jianghu, who was standing to the side with her back bent. The chief eunuch immediately understood and shouted loudly, "Court is dismissed. Minister Su, please stay. His Majesty wants to see you." The other courtiers left after shouting, "Long live the Emperor." Su Yozhen walked straight to the back of the palace and ran into the chief eunuch Jianghu, who had come to greet him. The other chuckled and said in a congratulatory tone, "Congratulations to Minister Su for becoming an imperial envoy." "Ah, Jin Gonggang, what are you saying? We are all working for His Majesty. There is no need to mention any congratulations. It should be the same." Su Yozhen also had a smile on his face. As he spoke, a banknote of 1,000 taels of silver was passed from his hand to Jin Ying's hand without anyone noticing. His gaze turned slightly. After glancing at the banknote in his hand, Jin Ying's expression became even more joyful. "Minister Su is truly a pillar of the country. Don't worry. Since Minister Su has the heart, this Gonggang will naturally help where it is necessary. Many thanks, many thanks." Su Yozhen cupped his hands in thanks. The two of them walked almost side by side to the back of the palace. Zhu Qiyu had been waiting in the palace for a long time. When he saw Su Yozhen come, he couldn't hide the joy in the corners of his eyes. When all the courtiers were at their wits' end, this person could stand up and find a way to solve the problem. He was also willing to bravely take on the heavy burden. Based on these, he should value him more. Someone, give Minister Su a seat. This official doesn't dare. Su Yozhen immediately revealed a look of fear and trepidation. Speaking of which, this was the first time he was given a seat when he met with the emperor in private. Ah, Minister Su, this is His Majesty's good intentions. You were able to stand up in times of danger. This seat must be given. Ji Ning, who had just received the banknote, immediately stood up and spoke to smooth things over. Su Yozhen, who had been polite to begin with, immediately revealed a very grateful expression. The rims of his eyes even reddened. It was as if he was about to shed tears of gratitude. He said, "This official thanks His Majesty." "Many thanks His Majesty." Su Yozhen's buttock sat down on the chair. What followed was naturally a scene of the monarch and his courtier chatting happily. "Minister Su, this time, you were able to take the initiative to stand up, come up with an idea, and accept this task. Zhen is very comforted. However, how confident are you that you will be able to persuade the Duke of Loyal Courage to transport the provisions for our army?" Zhu Qiyu's eyes were filled with anticipation as he asked. Although Su Yozhen was sitting on the chair, he still had a look of fear and trepidation. Seeing the emperor ask, he quickly replied, in reply to His Majesty, "About 50%? 50%? Only that much?" Zhu Qiyu's brows furrowed. He was clearly a bit dissatisfied. If that was the case, wouldn't it be very likely that he would be rejected? If that was the case, then as the emperor, his order was actually rejected by a subordinate. This was not a dignified thing to do. Even as the emperor, he cared a lot about face. Or perhaps he knew that he couldn't do it and still did it, so it was better not to do it. At least if he lost, his face would still be there. This was better than losing everything and being laughed at in private. Su Yozhen had been paying attention to the changes in Zhu Qiyu's expression. When he saw that the emperor was displeased, he quickly said, "Your Majesty. Although the Duke of Loyal Courage doesn't need to participate in the battle this time, transporting the provisions to the heavily surrounded Sanbu Lushuan city is no different from going to the battlefield. This official really doesn't have 100% confidence that I can persuade the Duke of Loyal Courage. Moreover, you also know that this official and the Duke of Loyal Courage have never gotten along. In the past, this official has even participated in a memorial to him. Speaking of which, this official really isn't a good persuader. If possible, could Your Majesty consider sending someone else?" Retreating in order to advance was what Su Yozhen wanted to express. He was prepared to make a request. If he couldn't take the initiative in his hands, how could this request be discussed? Zhu Qiyu naturally knew about the discord between Su Yozhen and Yang Chendong. This was also the important reason why he was relieved to promote this person. This time, when he was sent to the beginning city, he didn't have to worry about the two colluding. This was also the reason why he agreed to let the other party be the imperial envoy so quickly. Now that he heard that Su Yozhen wanted to shirk the responsibility, how could Zhu Qiyu be willing to let it go? He immediately said, "Dear official Su, what do you mean?" Zhen has just issued a decree in front of all the civil and military officials. How can I casually take it back? Zhen thinks that you should go. If you have any requests, you can make them now. As long as the Duke of Loyal Courage can help transport the provisions, any conditions can be discussed. Zhu Qiyu also had no other choice. Not only was he optimistic that Su Yozhen was a suitable candidate, but the important thing was that the other court officials didn't have the intention to go. Even though he was the emperor and could make a decision at will, no one dared to refuse when he asked the court officials to go. But what good result could there be if they were forced? If they messed up the task, then there would be no medicine for regret. On the other hand, Su Yozhen was the one who came up with the idea, thought of the method, and recommended himself to go. Presumably, he was mentally prepared. There was no need to give up a suitable candidate and use someone else. Zhu Qiyu agreed to raise conditions and requests. Su Yozhen was waiting for this sentence. He immediately stood up, clasped his fist, and said with an incomparably solemn expression, "I have a way to guarantee that the Duke of Loyal Courage will send troops to transport the provisions." Guarantee? Are you 100% sure? Zhu Qiyu's eyes lit up as he asked. Yes, 100% sure. Su Yozhen said with a tone that said he was going all out. Okay, tell me. Zhu Qiyu didn't agree in a hot-headed manner. Instead, he wanted to hear what the request was first. It was enough to see that after being the emperor for a few years, he had learned to be calm and had learned to leave a trick up his sleeve. With a conflicted expression, Su Yozhen didn't immediately reply. He knelt on the ground with a plop and said, "Emperor, I have no selfish motives for what I am about to say. It is only for the sake of Baiming's strength and future. I ask for Emperor's forgiveness for what I have said." Beloved official Su, what do you mean? This is a meeting between us ruler and official, not a court discussion. If you have anything to say, just say it. Zhen will forgive you. Zhu Qiyu said. Many thanks, Your Majesty. That being the case, this subject's only request is for Your Majesty to grant Duke Zhongdan the title of Great Bright Prince. With this request, this subject can guarantee that Duke Zhongdan will be of use to us and dispatch troops to transport grain. Kneeling on the ground, Su Yozhen saw that the time was right and said what he had prepared to say. Although Zhu Qiyu had made some preparations, he knew that he had to pay a price if he wanted to reach 100% from 50%. But when he heard Su Yozhen's request, he still couldn't hide the anger on his face. What, grant the title of king? How is that possible? Zhu Qiyu couldn't be blamed for being so angry. Since the Great Ming Dynasty's Emperor Taizu, the Great Ming Dynasty had stopped granting titles to people with different surnames. How could this rule be easily broken by him? Su Yozhen's proposal was too absurd. Chapter 968. Zhu Qiyu was angry, but Su Yozhen was not afraid. The current situation did not allow Dai Zong to make any other choice. If he could not make this request now, it would be even harder to find an opportunity in the future. Thus, he did not immediately speak. Instead, he looked at Jining beside Zhu Qiyu. Since he had taken his money, it was time for him to speak up for him. Jining, who had only taken 1,000 taels of silver, was furious. Originally, he thought that Su Yozhen was going to be put in an important position. It would be beneficial for him to have a good relationship with him. In addition, there was money to be taken. Wasn't this the best of both worlds? But now, this daring Su Yozhen actually proposed to make Yang Chendong Wang. This was something the emperor would never agree to. How did he have the guts to say this? It was only 1,000 taels of silver. It was impossible to order him to do such a big thing. At this moment, he kept his mouth tightly shut. He had even thought of returning the 1,000 taels of silver to Su Yozhen when he sent her out. The emperor did not speak. Jining also did not speak. Su Yozhen simply knelt on the ground and did not speak. For a moment, the rear hall was silent. You could hear a pin drop. After a full quarter of an hour, Zhu Qiyu saw that Su Yozhen did not speak. He did not admit his mistake and did not take back his request. He couldn't help but say angrily, "Beloved official Su, your suggestion is not acceptable. You should change your request." Yes, then please take off this official's imperial envoy hat and send this official to prison, Su Yozhen said without backing down. Prison? Zhu Qiyu's eyes widened. Yes, without this condition, this official cannot convince the Duke of loyalty. Since this is the case, it is better not to go this time. Your Majesty can use this time to think of other methods. The lives of 200,000 soldiers cannot wait for long, Your Majesty. Su Yozhen spoke as if there was no other way. In the end, he did not forget to threaten with the lives of 200,000 Baiming soldiers. Hearing the threat, Zhu Qiyu immediately stood up from the dragon throne and said angrily, "Is there no other way other than this? This subject is slow-witted and cannot think of a better way." Su Yozhen simply knelt on the ground and said without even raising his head. He knew that this was a risky move, but if he succeeded, the return would be worth it. If he could help Yang Chendong ascend to the throne, his achievements would naturally not be small. In the future, when the 5-star army was formed, he would be able to take the opportunity to obtain more benefits. Seeing that Su Yozhen had no intention of backing down, Zhu Qiyu was so angry that his entire body was trembling. He had thought that this person had come up with a good plan. It turned out that she wanted to confer the title of king on Yang Chendong. That being the case, it was not impossible for anyone to take this decision to force Yang Chendong to transport grain, or even to send troops. To the side, Jining hadn't thought that the situation would be in such a deadlock. Seeing the Emperor's dragon countenance grow angry, she immediately urged, "Your Majesty, please calm down. Your Majesty, please calm down. You must not harm your body over such a small matter. If your Majesty believes this subject, please go to the back of the hall to rest. This subject and Minister Su will have a good discussion." "Fine, it is impossible to confer the title of king. This matter must be completed. Minister Jin, do as you see fit." Zhu Qiyu really wanted to punish Su Yozhen, but he was worried that other than this person, no one else would be willing to step forward to solve the problem. He could only take a step back and see what the head eunuch beside him had to do. Zhu Qiyu left angrily. When only Su Shangshu and Jining were left in the hall, Su Yozhen slowly and unhurriedly stood up. She even casually patted the dust off her knees. There was not a trace of panic or nervousness on her face. Su Yozhen had originally thought that he had angered the emperor and was already in a state of fear and trepidation. Unexpectedly, he was not afraid at all and even had the time to put on an act. Jining was also angry and said, "Minister Su, you've gone too far. You've gone too far." Huh. Su Yozhen did not show any fear because of the other's anger. On the contrary, he smiled and said, "Jin Gonggang, do you think we have a choice right now? On one hand is the lives of 200,000 Baiming soldiers. On the other hand, it is only the title of king. I think Jin Gonggang can distinguish which is more important. The emperor clearly will not confer the title of king. How could Jining not know the importance of this matter?" But when he thought of Zhu Qiyu's attitude, he still spoke truthfully. 50,000 taels. After this matter is completed, I will tell Duke of Zhongdang what Jin Gonggang has done. I think he will be able to take out 50,000 taels. Su Yozhen did not wait for Jining to continue speaking and had already given a good price. This price stunned Jining. Then he said with a suspicious expression, "Could it be that Minister Su is one of Duke of Zhongdang's people?" Huh, what a joke. Su Yozhen's expression did not change and his heart did not skip a beat. Everyone knows what I have done to Duke of Zhongdang in the past. How could I be one of his people? This minister only thinks that this should be what Duke of Zhongdang wants. When the time comes, taking the opportunity to ask for some silver taels should not be excessive. Duke of Zhongdang is rich. I think many people know this. This explanation temporarily dispelled Jin Ying's misgivings. When he thought about it, it was true. Yang Chendong had wanted the title of king for a long time. This was something everyone knew. Su Yozhen was just using his title. But when he thought of the emperor's angry expression just now, he said inwardly, "The matter of being conferred the title of king is not a child's play. I'm afraid the emperor will not agree so easily. 100,000 taels. Once again, Su Yozhen took the initiative to raise the price. This time, there was a trace of seriousness in her tone. This is already the upper limit. I'm afraid that even if this minister personally makes a move, I can only obtain this from Duke Zhongdan. I have given my own share to Duke Gong. If it really doesn't work, then there is no need to discuss anymore. If the emperor is angry at me because of this, then this minister will accept it. Once I leave the palace, I will go to the prison and not trouble others. The benefits doubled again, reaching 100,000 taels of silver. Ji Ning, who had already been moved, was completely defeated by the money. His expression changed again and again. He thought to himself, it was just conferring Yang Chendong the title of king with a different surname. It was not like he was handing over the country to him. He could get 100,000 taels of silver. That was half of his wealth. At the same time, he could solve the emperor's problem. Why not? Ji Ning did not immediately speak. After Su Yozhen saw this, he knew there was a chance. He continued, the matter of conferring a title of king with a different surname has already been broken by the southern Mingying sect. We, Baiming, are just following suit. It is not much. Besides, even if it is a title of king, we can still do something about it. Oh? What is there to do? Ji Ning was interested. Although he was someone Zhu Qiyu trusted very much, if he wanted to convince the other on such a big matter, he needed a good reason. Su Yozhen knew this meant that Ji Ning had agreed. Now, it was time to solve the problem from a practical point of view. He immediately said what he was thinking. Jin Gonggong, since ancient times, the title of king has been given based on the fief. Then, we can give the Duke of Loyalty the title of Bugnam of Gojoseon. This is equivalent to us giving him the fief of the southern wastelands. At that time, the one who will have a headache will be Ying's sect. What loss will we have? Bugnam of Gojoseon. Hearing this title, Ji Ning could imagine how angry the southern Ming emperor would be after this matter. He might even be furious. This should be what the emperor wanted to see. He could vent the emperor's anger and resolve the crisis in front of him. He could even get 100,000 taels of silver. No matter how he looked at it, this was a suitable transaction. At this moment, a smile appeared on his face. Then, he and Su Yozhen burst out laughing together. After Ji Ning was convinced, he turned and walked towards the back of the hall. He didn't know what method he used. Perhaps Zhu Qiyu just wanted a way out. In any case, an hour later, Su Yozhen waited for Ji Ning, who was holding the imperial edict. Minister Su, the emperor is wise and decisive. He has already agreed to confer the title of Bugnam of Gojoseon to the Duke of Loyalty. This is the imperial edict. Ji Ning raised the imperial edict in his hand with a proud expression. Jin Gonggong is very capable. Su Yozhen gave him a thumbs up and sincerely praised him. Such an important matter as being conferred the title of prince was actually done by a single eunuch. It had to be said that the power of the eunuchs was truly heaven-defying. Just as Su Yozhen was about to reach out and take the imperial edict, Ji Ning suddenly put the edict behind his back and said, Minister Su, it is too late. The emperor has another request. This time, all of the grain needed in Sanbuchuan City will be provided by the Duke of Loyalty. This shouldn't be a problem, right? He didn't expect that Dai Zong would want to take advantage of such a small matter. He didn't have the bearing of a great nation at all. However, when he thought about how Yang Xie's power could sell grain to the southern Ming at a fair price, he thought that there shouldn't be a lack of grain. This shouldn't be a problem. He made the decision to agree. All right. N, when will we be able to get the 100,000 taels of silver? Ji Ning put forward her second request first before her personal one. Su Yozhen cursed the other for being greedy in his heart. He didn't think that he wasn't much better. However, at this moment, he still explained, Jin Gongong, I haven't even seen the Duke of Loyalty. Where will I get the silver to pay? However, please don't worry. Since I have agreed, I will naturally do it. When I return from the origin city, it will be the day that the silver will be presented. If I don't fulfill my promise, with Jin Gongong's power in the embroidered uniform guard, it won't be difficult to imprison me. Huh, Minister Su, what are you saying? I was just joking just now. After getting the answer he wanted, Jining immediately laughed and handed the imperial edict to Su Yozhen. Minister Su, when Sanbuchuan city is rescued, it will be the time when the emperor will personally announce the imperial edict to the world. This imperial edict will be enough to reassure the Duke of Loyalty. The moment Jining handed over the imperial edict, he also mentioned the time when the imperial edict would be announced. Chapter 969. Good, good. Su Yozhen looked at the imperial edict carefully, and after finding that there were no problems, he was overjoyed. With this imperial edict, he had made a great contribution. With this contribution, his position in the Yangxie would be secured. After all the officials left, Su Yozhen returned to his residence in the capital when it was almost dark. Then, he ordered people to prepare his luggage and left the capital early the next morning. Under the protection of 1,000 guards, he left the capital from Baiming to the Xian mansion. On the plains, after several days of preparation, under the orders of Yeshen, the Wara began to attack the city of Sanbuchuan. They used the Baiming red coat cannons to bombard the city walls and used their own spears to attack the enemy's shields, causing Shi Wanshan's forces to be under considerable pressure and casualties. Fortunately, there were many generals in the city. Under the leadership of Commander Shi, nearly 200,000 Baiming generals took turns to defend the city, and the two sides quickly entered a stalemate. The Wara were mostly cavalry, and they were not very good at siege work. Although they had the advantage of the red coat cannons, the number of shells was limited, and it did not take long before they ran out of ammunition. Seeing the strong will of the Baiming army to resist, Yeshen knew that the cannons could not achieve their goal of capturing the city, so he sent people to the Yili dynasty to ask for reinforcements. If there were any benefits, the two sides would share the benefits equally. Yili town was located to the north of Hetao, east of the Yili dynasty, and was an important transportation hub. At this moment, a virtuous official, Syed Ali Apel, who was also the prime minister of the Yili dynasty, was receiving General Kun Sa, who had just returned from the front lines in defeat. After Kun Sa met with Prime Minister Apel, he recounted how he had failed to negotiate with the 5-star army, and how he had been ambushed by the enemy. Then, with an aggrieved expression, he begged the Prime Minister to avenge him, as well as the loss of 27,000 soldiers. Apu was a famous minister in history. He had great foresight and was very opinionated. He did not take Kun Sa's words at face value. Instead, he comforted Kun Sa and advised him to get some rest. Then, he called for Kun Sa's lieutenant, Wuli Ji, and one of the 50 soldiers who had followed Kun Sa and Keegan. Through talking with them, he learned the truth of the matter. Seated alone in his residence, Arup had an extremely complicated expression on his face. He had already investigated the matter. First, he and Keegan spoke rudely, which led to their nose being cut off. Then, they thought they knew the truth about the 5-star army and wanted to launch a night attack. In the end, they were ambushed and defeated. Speaking of which, all of this seemed unreasonable, but in fact, the ones who were at a disadvantage were the cavalry of Yili. As their prime minister, he also had to do something. Otherwise, the morale of the army would be greatly affected. If that was the case, it would be difficult to lead the army. In front of him was all the information about the 5-star army sent by the Scouts and Intelligence Department. Arup received an answer. The 5-star army was powerful and had great financial resources. They were an extremely difficult opponent to deal with. Especially the speed of their development, it gave people a feeling of stupefaction. He even had a premonition that if he allowed the 5-star army to continue developing like this, he was afraid that there would be a day where a huge battle would break out between him and the 5-star army. If that was the case, it would be impossible for him not to fight even if he wanted to. Since there was going to be a battle sooner or later, why not take advantage of the fact that the other party wasn't ready for a bloody battle? Even if they couldn't destroy the 5-star core, they could use this battle to deplete the other party's strength and give themselves more time to develop. Arup was a very far-sighted person. It was like when others could only see 1 step ahead, he could already see 2 steps ahead. For the future, in order to maintain the general situation of the grassland, he finally made preparations to attack the 5-star army. Arup, who had not slept the whole night, welcomed General Kun Sa, who had rested for the night. The Prime Minister then said in a very confident tone, "The 5-star army has used despicable means to hurt our army. If we can tolerate this, what else can we do? For the sake of Ili's dignity, this time we must teach them a lesson." "The Prime Minister is wise," Kun Sa said excitedly after he received the support. Arup nodded and changed the topic. "It's just that the 5-star army is not so easy to deal with. Since we are going to fight, we must find a way to win. An alliance with the world of Wara is inevitable. How about this, our army will go to the Shajing area first and discuss with Chief Yeshen before we fight." This general obeys. When Kun Sa saw that this was going to be a big fight, he was so excited that his face turned red. It was time for him to make a contribution and take revenge. This time, the Kingdom of Ili sent a total of 180,000 troops at Yeshen's request. Apart from the 10,000 cavalry, 20,000 infantry, and 30,000 cavalry that were killed by the 5-star army, the rest of the 100,000 cavalry and 50,000 infantry were all brought to the battlefield. This time, in order to achieve the goal of severely damaging the 5-star army in one attack, Prime Minister Arup gave the order and the 150,000 troops set out from Ili city to the Shajing area, which was a few hundred miles away. In the Hetao area, only General Bo Muir from the world of Wara and his 80,000 cavalry and 20,000 infantry were left. Even so, the Datong soldiers were still scared into hiding in the Ningxia garrison and did not dare to take a step out. After all these years of development, Yeshen's strength had also grown. He now had a total of 270,000 troops, of which 20,000 were infantry and the rest were cavalry. Other than the 100,000 troops that were left behind to guard the Hetao area, he still had 170,000 cavalry soldiers. Most of them were brave warriors who could fight in battle, so they were not to be underestimated. It was a pity that cavalry soldiers were good at destroying their opponents while moving. Siege warfare like this was not their forte. Just like now, even after using up all 100 of the Baiming's red coat cannons, they were still unable to take down Sanbu Lechuan. At this moment, they could only sigh as they looked at the heavily damaged city not far away. Reporting, Lord Chief, the Prime Minister of the Ili Kingdom, Ali Pu, personally led a total of 150,000 soldiers from Ili Kingdom towards us from Ili Kingdom. The scout half-knelt and reported the battle situation. "Arup is here, good. With them, it won't be difficult to capture Sanbuchuan city." Hearing this, Yi Xian was naturally overjoyed. Truly, a pillow came when one was sleepy. At the same time, in the Yang residence in Genesis City, Yang Chendong received a report from the scouts on the front lines. The report stated that Ali Pu was leading 150,000 soldiers to the Shajing region, but his intentions were unclear. Standing in front of the sand table, Yang Chendong stood there for a long time, but he did not understand the main point. He was thinking about a question. Who was the target of the Ili army this time? If they were coming for the Baiming army, then why didn't they come with Yeshen? Why did they only come after the vanguard suffered a loss? Was it possible that they were here to take revenge? Did they really have the guts to do so? As the saying goes, the ignorant are innocent. The power of the 5-star army was known by the nearby grassland tribes. Therefore, the 5-star army had long become an existence that no one dared to provoke. But because the distance was too far, the Ili army did not know the real situation of the 5-star army. Without understanding the situation, they might really do something stupid. Before he could figure this out completely, his personal telegrapher, Wang Shan, sent another telegram from the Security Bureau of the Northern Ming Dynasty. It explained in detail what happened in the imperial court of the Northern Ming Dynasty and how Su Yozhen, the minister of the Ministry of Justice, asked to come to Shi City to persuade him to provide provisions to Sanbuchuan City. Interesting. Looking at this telegram, Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with a meaningful smile. He had a feeling that Su Yozhen must have come to give him some good news. Otherwise, he wouldn't make such a big decision without asking for his permission. It was just that Baiming already owed him 11 million taels of silver. What benefits could they give him? Yang Chendong was not a god. Su Yozhen did not leak the news that he was going to be crowned king in advance. Of course, he would not be able to guess. Su Yozhen, who brought the imperial edict, rode a fast horse day and night after leaving Baiming's capital. Now that the military situation was urgent, there was no time to waste. The most important thing was that if the 5-star army couldn't provide provisions to Sanbu Luchuan in time, once the city was breached, all of his plans would fail. The so-called king conferment would also come to nothing. In that case, his so-called great achievements would also disappear without a trace. Not wanting to see such an outcome, Su Yozhen was forced to change horses and not people along the way. The journey that should have taken a month took only 13 days to get out of Tala's city and to the foot of the city. Su Yozhen was Baiming's Minister of Justice, a major second-rank civil official. He was an extremely important person even without any auxiliary officials. In order to show his respect, Yang Chendong took the initiative to come out of the city to welcome him. Several thousand cavalry stood on both sides, displaying such a grand display. While Su Yozhen, who had just arrived, was extremely moved, he was also inwardly shocked. As the Minister of Justice, he had tens of thousands of bailiffs under his command. Among them, there was no lack of capable people with extraordinary means. There were even some people who had made quite a name for themselves. Their murderous aura could often make criminals tremble all over just by standing there, and they would open their mouths to plead guilty before being tortured. Just from this aspect alone, Su Yozhen could be considered someone who had seen a bit of the world. At the very least, a normal formation would not scare him. In his eyes, the killing intent of a murderer was nothing much. He was already used to it. Only now, when he saw these cavalry soldiers, did he understand what it meant to be a small fry in front of a great one. There would always be someone stronger. Chapter 970. These cavalrymen were just sitting on their horses, but their murderous aura was overflowing. They were imposing without being angry, giving Su Yozhen a very oppressive feeling. In addition, they had been on the road non-stop for days without rest. At this moment, his face was frighteningly pale. "You can all leave." Yang Chendong noticed the change in Su Yozhen and knew that the deterrence effect had worked. He immediately waved his hand at the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tian Hu. That's right, the cavalrymen who stood on both sides and temporarily acted as the welcoming team were Tian Hu's 1st Cavalry Division. This was their first appearance after returning to the beginning city. Before this, Tian Hu had been selecting and evaluating the new members of the cavalry division. From the original 3 divisions to the current 5 divisions, almost half of the military strength was expanded. This was naturally a good thing for Tian Hu. However, how to increase the number of people without losing the combat power was the problem he should consider. In order to achieve the individual quality of every soldier and to be able to exert enough strength and play a role on the battlefield, Tian Hu personally participated in the evaluation. In this way, he selected people one by one. It was not easy to gather more than 4,000 people and complete the task of expanding the division. It was just a source of 4,000 soldiers, but it took a few months. Just from this point alone, the combat power of the 1st Cavalry Division would only become stronger. Even Yang Chendong was looking forward to their performance on the battlefield. The 1st Cavalry Division's first appearance scared the senior officials sent by the Imperial Court of Beiming. Although the commander, Tian Hu, looked serious, he was in a good mood. Obviously, he was very satisfied with this result. Until Yang Chendong waved his hand, he led the team to continue their inhuman training. Perhaps Su Yozhen was tired, or perhaps she was afraid, but she was sent to rest in the carriage. Yang Chendong wanted to know the other party's intentions for coming here, mainly to see what kind of conditions the substitute sect master Zhu Qiyu could offer, and whether or not he would be moved. However, looking at Su Yozhen's current state, it was clear that they couldn't discuss anything. He had no choice but to arrange for him to stay in the guest house at the beginning of the city and wait for him to rest. Su Yozhen had a good sleep. He slept from the afternoon all the way until the next morning. When he opened his eyes and woke up, he felt much less tired. At this moment, it could be said that his ears and eyes were sharp, and he was full of energy. After waking up early in the morning and changing into clean clothes, Su Yozhen was attracted by the hawkers outside the guest house. He decided not to ask someone to prepare breakfast. Instead, he decided to go out for a walk and try the local snacks. Under the protection of a squad of soldiers in the open and in the dark, Su Yozhen came to the street. He saw a very bustling scene, a street market that was not inferior to the morning market of the capital. When he saw the people in costumes of various races walking in a friendly and harmonious manner on the wide street, and the peddlers selling food, clothes, necessities, and toys were next to each other, and there were people standing in front of each stall, he could not help but ask the guide arranged for him by the guest house curiously, "Everyone is from different races, how can they get along harmoniously? How can the language problem be solved? What if there is a dispute?" The guide was a man in his 30s. He was originally a squad leader of the new army, but his leg was injured in a battle. He could not gallop freely on a horse, so he retired and worked in the guest house. As someone who had seen much of the world, he had received countless guests and encountered all kinds of questions. He was not surprised by Su Yozhen's curiosity at all. Instead, he explained with a face full of enthusiasm. "Sir, please rest assured. The language problem has long been regulated. When you enter the first city, you must speak Chinese in public. For this reason, there is a special Chinese class for everyone to learn, and it is free. In the first city, only after learning Chinese can one be allowed to do business. When everyone speaks Chinese, there is naturally no problem of language barriers. Once there is a dispute, there will be special management personnel to judge who is right and wrong. However, at the same time, any fighting is prohibited in the city. Otherwise, no matter who is right or wrong, they will be severely punished." Facing the guide with a smile, Su Yozhen first nodded and then shook his head. There were also laws in the capital. If one did something bad or wrong, one would be locked up in the Ministry of Justice. However, such things could not be eliminated. Why was there also a law to regulate it? It seemed that the public security in the first city was very orderly. Until now, he had not seen a case of an argument, let alone a fight. Huai Yu was puzzled and could not help but ask again, "The law here must be very strict, right?" It was no wonder that Su Yozhen would have such a thought. If the law was not strict, there would definitely be people who could not help but suppress their temper and violate the law. Only harsh laws could make people have no choice but to restrain their temperament under high pressure. "Sir, you're right. The law in the first city is quite strict. Once someone makes a mistake, the lightest punishment is a warning, and the heaviest punishment is a beheading." The guide nodded and answered with a straight face. "Beheaded? That will make everyone afraid from the bottom of their hearts." Su Yozhen said this as the Minister of Justice. As soon as he finished speaking, the guide beside him shook his head. Sir, you're wrong. Although there is the crime of being beheaded, in fact, there are very few people who are beheaded. After all, if they are not vicious and evil people, they won't be sentenced to such a heavy sentence. In fact, what everyone is most afraid of is being kicked out of the first city and being ordered to never enter all the cities under the jurisdiction of the 5-star army. This is the most unacceptable thing for ordinary people. Being expelled? Although this is also a heavy sentence, it doesn't seem to be a very serious matter. Su Yozhen had a look of disagreement on her face. It's just being kicked out of the city. Isn't there a saying in the underworld that if there's no place for you, there will be a place for you? No, no. Sir, you don't know, but all the cities under the control of the 5-star army are guaranteed safety. Once you enter such a city, it's equivalent to having a guarantee of safety. This guarantee is something that the grassland people didn't have in the past. They're used to wandering around, especially in recent years. They're even prepared to have a machete on their necks in the middle of the night when they sleep at night. This makes them feel too insecure, and this sense of security happens to be given to everyone by the 5-star army. Therefore, the right to live in the city is precious to many people. At this point, the guide introduced with a smile, "Sir, if you don't believe me, you can go and see if the people in the city have a relaxed smile on their faces." This is the charm of the 5-star army's city because everyone knows that as long as they abide by the law here, no one will threaten their safety. They can also live a happy life with their hands. Isn't this what the ordinary people need? The words "what the ordinary people need" caused Su Yozhen's face to turn red. Indeed, what the ordinary people wanted was to have food to eat, clothes to wear, and a house to sleep in. As long as these conditions were met, they would usually become very obedient under normal circumstances. However, this simple request wasn't something that all governments could fulfill. They continued to walk on the street, looking and carefully observing. Just as the guide said, most of the ordinary people had a very natural and relaxed smile on their faces. This kind of smile was rare even in the capital of Baiming. It had been less than 3 years since the establishment of the first city, but now it was so prosperous. Just on this point, Su Yozhen had to admire Yang Chendong's ability. This made him even more determined to follow in Yang Chendong's footsteps and not waver easily. After having breakfast on the street, he found time to chat with some ordinary people. After having a clearer understanding of the situation in the first city, Beta Persei appeared beside him. "Minister Su, you're in a good mood." "Ah. It's Brother Beta Persei. Did the Duke of Loyalty summon me?" At this moment, Su Yozhen's attitude became more respectful. "That's right. I went to the guest house and found that Sir Su was not there. It turns out that you're here to check on the situation of the people. How is it? When are you going to see the young master?" Beta Persei said unhurriedly. Originally, Yang Chendong's order to him was very relaxed, and everything was based on Su Yozhen's own decision. I'll go now." Su Yozhen held a copy of the first city's Yang report in his hand and raised his arm. From this newspaper, he had a clearer understanding of the situation in the first city. He had a clear understanding that this was indeed a developing and thriving city. Although its foundation was still lacking, it was full of vitality. Anyone with a little knowledge could see its potential. In particular, Yang Baozhong had specially opened a current affairs column, which clearly talked about the war that was going on in Sanbuchuan City hundreds of miles away. Everything was written on the surface, but there was not the slightest bit of panic in the first city. This alone was something that the capital of Baiming could not compare to. Compared to the people there who were afraid of war and the imperial court had to block all unfavorable news of the war, the calmness of the people here surprised Su Yozhen. They were not afraid of war. What kind of courage was this? How did Yang Chendong do this? All of this made Su Yozhen curious. Now, he wanted to see Yang Chendong and get an answer. "Okay, Sir Su, please come with me." Yang Air smiled as he led the way. Su Yozhen was in the middle of the group. It was unknown when, but many soldiers in civilian clothes had appeared behind her. They were protecting her very tightly. After all, Su Yozhen came to represent the face of Baiming. There must be no accidents. Chapter 971. In the Yang residence, various fruits had already been placed on the stone table in the courtyard, and the freshly brewed tea leaves were still steaming. When Su Yozhen arrived, she saw Yang Chendong looking at Yang Bao leisurely. This was almost a daily homework for Yang Chendong. He would learn about what happened yesterday through the newspaper. If he thought something was important, he would pay extra attention to it. When necessary, he would order people to deal with it. This not only made him closer to the people, but also gave them a sense of loyalty and courage, which increased the importance of Yang Bao in the first city. "Young master, Lord Su is here." Beta Persei's voice could be heard from a distance. When Yang Chendong turned his head, he saw Su Yozhen standing there respectfully a few steps away. His head was slightly lowered, and he looked like a subordinate meeting a superior. Yang Chendong was not surprised that Su Yozhen would have such an attitude. With the reminder that he had personally gone to Baiming's capital last time, and seeing the prosperity of the first city this time, as long as there was nothing wrong with his brain, he would know what kind of attitude he should have after seeing him. "Come, Minister Su, come and take a seat." Yang Chendong waved his hand while he was still far away. Su Yozhen quickly agreed and hurried over. As he walked forward, Yang Chendong's voice could be heard again. "Beta Persei, pass down the order. If there is nothing particularly important this morning, the young master will not see any guests." "Understood." Beta Persei agreed and left. Soon, there was the sound of the courtyard door closing behind him, indicating that Yang Chendong was going to have a long talk with him. Su Yozhen hurried over and sat down opposite Yang Chendong. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with curiosity, doubt, and even admiration. Yang Chendong saw Su Yozhen's performance from the corner of his eyes and smiled in his heart. If a capable person wanted to control him, he would have to show more ability. Clearly, he had done it now. "Minister Su, you've traveled thousands of miles to come here. You must have something to teach me, right? But I wonder if it's good news?" "It's good news, great news, sixth young master." After being stared at by Yang Chendong, Su Yozhen's original intention of playing with him disappeared. She stretched out her hand and took out her trump card, the imperial edict that conferred the title of king. His original intention to bargain was no longer there. The only thing left was how to make Yang Chendong happy and please him. "Sixth young master, this is the imperial edict of bestowment that I have spent a great deal of effort to get from the Daizong Emperor. Please take a look and see if you are satisfied. Coronation Imperial Decree." Yang Chendong, who had originally ignored everything that had happened, had a change in expression at this moment. Yang Chendong had tried many times to be bestowed the title of king, but the great Ming dynasty's ancestral system was there. It was obviously difficult and not easy to succeed. But as the Yang faction's influence continued to expand, this thought also faded away. Could it be that if he didn't become king, he would have no power? Could it be that if the great Ming dynasty didn't recognize him, his Yang Xie wouldn't exist? He just didn't expect that a good thing like being bestowed the title of king would fall on his head when he had already given up on it. With a trace of excitement, Yang Chendong opened the imperial edict under the golden cover. Holding the imperial edict in his hand, he looked at the words one by one. After a while, Yang Chendong's voice sounded with a sigh. "Bugnam of Gojoseon, although there are other motives, the Daizong Emperor has indeed put in some capital this time. Presumably, the things he needs me to do won't be too small." What kind of person was Yang Chendong? How shrewd and ruthless was his vision? Just the title of Bugnam of Gojoseon made him see a lot of problems. There was no need to mention the word marshal. His various actions had already proved that this word was really appropriate to use on him. The word, south, had some meaning. It meant that the small countries of the southern barbarian that Yang Chendong occupied were all in the south. He himself should also be in the south. As for the matters in the north, he didn't need to worry about them. Although it was just a title, the Daizong Emperor of Baiming still expressed his intention. That was, he hoped that Yang Chendong wouldn't stay in the north and would go to the south to cause trouble for the southern Ming. The sixth young master, this title was reported to the Daizong Emperor after much consideration. I think this is the only way for this title to be granted. If there is anything inappropriate, I hope that the sixth young master will forgive me. Su Yozhen lowered his head and said these words with a slightly guilty conscience. He couldn't tell if Yang Chendong really liked this title, but he didn't dare to hide the things that should be said. He also had to express the attitude that should be expressed. Feeling Su Yozhen's cautiousness, he sighed in admiration. This person was indeed worthy of being a powerful official in history. His ability to observe people's expressions and see through people's hearts was truly extraordinary. However, since he was already granted the title of king, his wish had been fulfilled. As for the title of king, he didn't really care. Could it be that if he was granted the title of Bugnam of Gojoseon, he would only be able to move about in the south? Turning his head, he folded the imperial edict and put it aside. Yang Chendong's face revealed a sincere smile. What is Minister Su saying? Being granted the title of king is enough. What is inappropriate about it? Don't think too much. Come, let me toast you with tea in place of wine. I don't dare, I don't dare. Su Yozhen said as he stood up. Yang Chendong had already laughed heartily and drank the tea. Then, he gestured for Su Yozhen to sit down. Minister Su, there are no outsiders here. It's just the two of us. There's no need to be so formal. I won't call you minister anymore. How about I change it to Brother Su? That's good, that's good. Su Yozhen nodded continuously. From the moment he entered this small courtyard, the initiative was completely in Yang Chendong's hands. What he needed to do was to conform to this person. Yes, Brother Su. In order to achieve this imperial edict, you must have put in a lot of effort. Tell me more about it. Yang Chendong asked with a smile on his face. He had thought of many ways to achieve this but failed. Now that Su Yozhen had done it, he wanted to reward him. Yes, sixth young master. The situation is like this. Su Yozhen knew that this was not the time to be polite. He told him about his proposal in the imperial court, as well as the discussion he had with the emperor and eunuch Jining in the back of the palace. Yang Chendong sat there and listened attentively. From time to time, he would nod and cooperate with Su Yozhen's speech. When Su Yozhen stopped talking, he laughed loudly and said, "You only gave Jining 100,000 taels of silver in exchange for the title of king?" "Yes, that's the only condition." Su Yozhen nodded, but he was shocked. He knew that Yang Chendong was rich. The goods sold by the Beyond Heavens Trading Company in the capital were all profitable. 100,000 taels of silver was not a problem for him. However, transporting food to Sanbuchuan was not an easy task. No matter how he looked at it, this person did not seem to care. Without Su Yozhen's shock at the imperial court, Yang Chendong spoke again. "Alright, if it's only a small matter, this king can agree to it right now." At this moment, he considered himself to be the Bugnam of Gojoseon. After saying this, he said generously, "Brother Su has worked hard this time. Naturally, you should be rewarded. How about this, I will give you 200,000 taels of silver as a reward." This way, she could earn 200,000 taels of silver. Su Yozhen's heart was naturally overjoyed, but her face still had to put on a look of refusal. "Aya, sixth young master, you can't do this. You said that we are on the same boat, and I will be your subordinate in the future. How can you give me money like this? I have to give, I have to give. If you have done well, you should be rewarded. This is my rule. Alright, Brother Su, I will not refuse. If I continue to refuse, I will only think that 200,000 taels of silver is too little. Alright, then thank you, sixth young master. Su Yozhen immediately stopped talking. He knew what it meant to be insatiable. He also knew that such people were the most disliked. He knew when to stop. Yes. Seeing that Su Yozhen was so tactful, Yang Chendong smiled in satisfaction. Then, his tone changed. With just this small benefit, I'm afraid it is not enough to make this a reality. I think Dai Zong still needs to give a gift. How about this, give him 5 million taels of silver. Give Dai Zong 5 million taels of silver? When he heard this, Su Yozhen's eyes widened. He didn't know what was wrong with Yang Chendong to say such a thing. Could it be that he had too much money? Even if others didn't ask for money, he still wanted to give them money? Su Yozhen had wrongly accused Yang Chendong. Yang Xia had opened up a business path. Many of the products were not available outside. He had indeed relied on this to make a lot of money. However, ever since Yang Xia was established, it was not an exaggeration to say that he spent money like water. Especially after occupying a piece of land, he needed a lot of money to build it. Many of the small countries that he occupied had not been able to fully display their usefulness. There was no way to get back the money, and they still needed Yang Xia's constant financial support. One place was like this, two places were like this. When the land was like this, Yang Xia did not have a lot of money in his hands. Although it could not be described as having too much money to make ends meet, he still needed to think carefully before casually giving out 5 million taels of silver. Even though he knew this, Yang Chendong still did it. The reason was because of what Su Yozhen said. Dai Zong had written an imperial edict, but if he wanted to announce the matter of him being crowned king, he needed to wait for Yang Chendong to resolve the crisis in Sanbulachuan city. However, would the truth really be like this? Would Dai Zong go back on his word? Right now, he didn't want to see the 200,000 Baiming soldiers fall, so he had no choice but to crown himself as king. Once the crisis was resolved, if he didn't want to, he would have 100 or even 1,000 reasons to not fulfill his promise. At that time, what would Yang Chendong do? Would he start a war with Baiming? Let's not talk about whether or not Yang Xi had such strength now. Just the fact that once the war started, it would be a kind of damage to the Han people. This was far from what Yang Chendong wanted to see. Thus, in order to prevent him from breaking his promise, he had to give Baiming 5 million taels of silver. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.